This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
Why is bridge selling when most card players play poker? Doug McFarland blurted out, "I bet if we had strip poker instead of poker, it would sell." And we all kind of said, "That's it."
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Art Walsh was co-founder of Dynacomp, an early software publisher that created software for many platforms, including many educational and game titles for the Atari 8-bit computer. He later founded Artworx, a software publisher that produced titles including Bridge, Cranston Manor, Gwendolyn, Hazard Run, Hotel Alien, and Strip Poker. This interview took place on May 26, 2017. In it, we discussed Jerry White, whom I previously interviewed.
I was born in Brooklyn during the war, and when my father was called to service, we moved from Brooklyn to Paterson, New Jersey, where my mother was born and raised. And then we moved across the Passaic River from Passaic County, New Jersey, to Bergen County, which is sort of a bedroom county of New York City, and that's where I grew up and went to school through high school, and it was an interesting time. Had a good childhood. And I decided that I wanted to go away from the New York area for school. And I chose RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology. And they had an interesting program called Photographic Science, which is kind of hard to describe. So maybe I just won't. But a lot of my classmates, upon graduation, went into some very interesting areas. A lot of them were picked up by the CIA, agencies like that, or companies that were working on spy satellites and so forth. This all has to do with the science of imaging and so forth. I was fortunate to, in my previous year, my finishing my junior year, my roommate and I decided that we'd like to stay in Rochester, find a job, and stay through the summer, and then go into our senior year. And we sent out or filled out the appropriate forms for various places of interest in Rochester, which back then was, have to say, it was sort of a high-tech city. The largest employer, of course, or maybe not, of course, since the company is bankrupt, is Kodak. And I sent my form into a company called Haloid Xerox, which was a precursor of Xerox, and applied. The form asked, "What would you like to do?" And my roomie was filling out the same form, and apparently he wrote down anything. And I wrote down research, and we sent our forms in. And a few days later, my roomie got a letter. He said, "Oh, no." And he opened it. It was a thank you, but we'll let you know if something pops up. And I didn't get anything. And then, God bless Xerox, what a wonderful company. 2 days after that, I got a telegram a real telegram.
Wow.
You know, delivered, guy rings the bell, and there it is, and little strips pasted on Western Union, and it's basically saying, inviting me for an interview at Xerox, to interview with Dr. Vestevla Talagan's group, and which I did, and we hit it off quite nicely. And I proceeded to spend the most wonderful summer working in the research labs of Xerox. And that was the time when they had just introduced their famous 914 copier.
Mm-hmm.
But the research, this was actually, at that point, it was called applied research. They had basic research and applied research, and Talagan's area was in the applied research. And they were working on various projects, but there's a new, they're trying to get into color systems. The 914, of course, was the first xerographic machine that was really usable, and it was black and white only. And they wanted to get some sort of copier that would work in color. So the accent in the imaging methods department was color imaging, but that was a high priority for the research area in Xerox. And since I wasn't a full-time employee, just a summer employee, I couldn't work in those particular laboratories, by which I mean there are maybe 3 rooms about the size of an old dark room. Mm-hmm. That's for the research of that particular project was going on. But I wound up working on a different type of process called frost imaging, which actually is neither here nor there. And I did a good job. And it was made known to me that I would have a very easy path to working for Xerox full-time
nice.
When the time came.
Mm-hmm.
It was very, very nice. So sure enough, I graduated and joined Dr. Talagan's imaging methods group again, this time working on the color project. And don't know how much detail you want to go into. It can get sort of convoluted and so forth, but it was a very, very interesting time.
So you were there at Xerox from 64 through 1980, is that right?
Yeah. My summer started in 63, mm-hmm. and that's when the Xerox became the go stock. You know, what did they have back then? Nifty 50 or I forget, but a bunch of high-tech companies, and Xerox was sort of in the forefront mm-hmm. of that. They're making money hands over fist. It was really quite amazing. I worked there for 17 years. I spent my first 9 years there working on this particular project called PEP. It stood for photoelectrophoresis imaging in color. What that basically was, if you put some photosensitive particles in an electric field and you shine light on them, the particles would respond by changing polarity to whatever color light was being shown on them. And in color, you basically got 3 different receptors, if you will. One is going to react to red light, the other green, and so forth. And the idea was to get these particles to move properly when exposed to a color image so that we could reproduce the color image. Never went to market. In fact, in my 17 years at Xerox, nothing I worked on ever made any money. Never made it to market. But I had a lot of fun. But more important, I got it. I think it's very rare that when you go off to school, particularly in technical areas, when you start working in your career path, if you use 10 or 15% of what you learned in school, that's usually pretty good. And so I probably used 10 or 15% of the knowledge that I picked up at RIT, but it was also a learning experience. The project that I was on, PEP, the images that we were making had to be analyzed, and the numbers that we needed had to be obtained through some measuring devices that would give us numbers, and the numbers had to be managed and massaged and looked at statistically. And we had a big computer center with a big UNIVAC, and I thought, well, I had a brief introduction to computers at school, so I knew the answer to our calculations lay in having them done quickly, and why not use a computer? So I got involved in computers. To make a long story short, my career path at Xerox leaned further and further in the direction of computers and programming and so forth. And I was recruited by a person who was setting up a very, very small project that was actually, they were taking the shell of a 914 copier, and they were trying to make that into a color copier. There was another group that was doing it using xerography to do it, and another group, part of which was out in Pasadena, was trying to use red, green, and blue lasers to illuminate the original and get a copy made from that. And there are interesting problems when your light source is red, green, and blue lasers rather than a continuous spectrum light source. And I got involved in trying to optimize, what the three wavelengths should be of the red, green, and blue lasers and things like that.
Cool.
Now, what happened was the person who recruited me, we kind of clicked, and he was a very, very smart fellow, and that we had common interests. And at that time, which was about 1975, 1976, MITS, which is the company that created the first home computer, the Altier 8800, and Fred, my supervisor, ordered one. It only came in kit form. It cost $495, I think, and you got a box full of components and a shell which looked like a big bread basket. And he put one together. He said, "This is neat," and thought that we could use it in our laboratories and have our machines directly input their output into a computer and do all sorts of image analysis on it, which we were able to do. Mm-hmm. And he he tried getting me interested in the computers, and I'm used to working Fortran on mainframes, but and I was also cheap. I didn't want to spend the $400. But what I did is I took his schematic for the Altair 8800, and we had a very nice parts inventory at Xerox, and I, with the help of one of our technicians, I wound up wire wrapping a computer using the schematic and building it. They laughed at me when I was putting it together because it looked like literally a bread box. The box, when it's finished, was made out of plywood. Fred and I, he started writing articles for Byte magazine, and at that time we had separated, and there was a lull of about a week or so in between my assignments for me, and I had this computer sitting in my desk and said, oh, what the heck? I'm going to see if I can program it to play bridge, which I did. And Fred, in the meantime, was writing articles, as I said, for Byte magazine, and he wrote a computer simulation of trying to, you were piloting a oil tanker and trying to dock it, simple stuff. And most of the programs were being written by then, but appearing in magazines, you really couldn't buy them. But we decided, hey, let's start a software company. And he said, you got that bridge program. I got the oil tanker simulation, and we could easily knock off a few others, and why don't we see if we can sell those? And we did. We were still at Xerox, but mostly on our own time. We started writing different programs. With the bridge program, I was able to take most of the code and make it into playing the game of hearts, and Fred came up with a few scientific programs, and we decided, well, let's do it. We formed a company, and it was one of the first software companies, and the name is Dynacomp. And we ran ads in Byte magazine, and I think the first ad came out in 78 or so, and we started getting an order here and there for our software. And fast forwarding a little bit more, we were selling enough software to think, well, maybe this could be a real business. And at that time, computer stores started opening up. There's a chain called Byte Shops and Micro, I forget the name of that, but they were a large chain. And we started getting, we were producing software on cassette tapes, 8mm cassette tape, not even 8mm, the real tiny. Yeah,
just the standard cassettes,
tapes.
Right.
Yeah, audio cassettes. And that was the time of, PET, Commodore's PET had come out, and we figured, well, why not? We started the few programs that we had, since they were written in BASIC, and all these machines operated on BASIC. It was a fairly simple matter to convert from one flavor of BASIC to the other, from what was in essence Microsoft BASIC to Commodore BASIC, and we did that. then Apple came out with their computers, so we were going to transfer software to that. In the midst of all that, we had a disagreement as to how the company should proceed, and we also had a conflict personality-wise. And we decided we would have to part ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we both wanted to keep Dynacomp, and pretty much I won't say flip the coin, but I said, well, look, give me an offer for my half. And so we split up the company, and we had been publishing some game software. Home programmers were writing programs, and they saw that we were selling programs, so they were sending programs to us, see if we wanted to publish them or not. So we sort of had maybe 20 or 30 programs that we're actively selling in one way or the other, and we very fairly split them up. You pick one, I'll pick one, and so forth. And I left, and we, along with some of the game software that I took, I also took two of our local programmers, mm-hmm. One who was working at Xerox and another who was working at Kodak. And they're writing game software. And they were writing software for the Atari 800 that had just come out. In fact, we didn't even have an Atari at Dynacomp. So I got involved in that and created Artworx.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, before we get to Artworx, I have a couple of questions about Dynacomp, which yes. I was not familiar with before, and I'm looking at you guys came out with a lot of software, even for the Atari. I mean, the list goes on for pages.
Yes.
Did you program any of it yourself? First of all,
when we started Dynacomp, all of the software was between Fred and myself. Mm-hmm. We very quickly started getting submissions or contacted by programmers who saw the address, our P.O. Box, Webster, New York, which is where Xerox was located, a suburb of Rochester. And so, we were picking up software here and there. So we were getting mostly game software in, and Fred was busy turning out scientific or mathematic software. We started getting a few submissions in that. If you're looking at more than, when I left Dynacomp, we were running very full-page ads with maybe 20 programs on it or so. And at least half at that point were unsolicited submissions by programmers now throughout the country.
Did you paid them royalties or?
Yeah.
Or what? Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. They would send us a working version, and we would get the copyright for them, and they would work on whatever we got. They would get 15% of the net proceeds. I think mm-hmm. it was. Yeah. Well, basically, whatever we got paid, they got 15% of. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it was sold at discount. Because one day we got a call from a store who wanted to order 10 of the bridge programs. And wanted to know what our dealer policy was, which we didn't have one. So I said, well, yeah, we could obviously give you a discount. We'll set something up, and we'll get back to you on that. So we sort of looked at each other and said, well, no, we need some packaging. So there was a micro center, was it called, down the street from us, a computer store. And we went over there to look at how they were selling software, and everything was in baggies. Little baggies hanging on hooks, pegboards, and with cassettes in them. And so we looked at it, well, we can do that. So we figured out, okay, we'll offer 40% discounts to dealers, and we have access to copiers, obviously. So we put together a packaging, and our biggest expense then was we had to buy cassettes in bulk, and it would be nice if we had a label that said Dynacomp. So we had labels for that printed out and so forth, and we run off the titles for the labels through our tin feed Diablo printer that I had, which was a very high quality printer. So that's when it was about that time that we split up. And Fred's Dynacomp is an interesting story in that he really wanted to concentrate on more serious software, but his philosophy was, we'll publish anything. And my philosophy was, let's publish what'll sell. And that wasn't the cause of the split, but when we did split, we were two different companies pretty much.
Sure. It looks like Dynacomp started churning out Atari software, at least in 1980, and did that until 1983. I think Artworx started in 1981, so you were probably there for a year or two. Does that sound about right?
Well, yeah. I left Dynacomp in 80 and got together with our two local programmers, and they wanted to be part of the company, so I gave them both they had less than half of the company. And so we proceeded as a partnership agreement, and then we incorporated in 1981. So officially we started in 81.
Okay.
And we got hooked up with one of our customers at Dynacomp was calling from the largest advertising firm in Boston, and he was looking for a company to help him with some software tools so that they could send out mailings using these new computers, microcomputers. And he was interested in one of the programs that Dynacomp was selling, which was a form letter system. It was basically a mailing system, an address system. Actually, what it was is when we started Dynacomp, we put together catalogs, and we needed a mail list. So I took that on as my project. It was pretty simple to program. You input the name. So I ran off one real quick to help run on our microcomputers. And in fact, that was one of the things that we were selling. I think we call it mail list system. and I made another modification to it where it could actually generate form letters and write the same letter and input the appropriate address and just knock out labels from that. So Michael Baldwin was his name, and he wanted to know whether that program could be modified somewhat. I said, sure, we could do anything. Just charge you by the hour. And so I knocked off what he wanted. It didn't take long at all, and charged him a very modest fee for it. And we struck up a friendship. And at that point, I told him, we're separating. I'm starting my own company. And he got really, really excited about that. He said, "Wow, I want to be involved. I can see it right now. You need boxes. We can work on the catalog, and we can do all that stuff here in Boston. I got a great copywriter and great artist." And so he really, really wanted to get involved. So he said, well, okay. And he said, well, what are you going to call the company? I said, I don't know. Said we were bouncing around different things. Who knows? Said, well, let me work on that. And I said, well, go ahead if you want. It's our company. We're going to keep the name. They said, yeah, but I want to be involved in it. I'll do it gratis. Let's see how it works out. So he came back, and my two partners and I, and my wife, we were kind of brainstorming different names and everything, and we were thinking Enigma software or signature software, and my wife liked Fuzzy Soft for some reason. We keep laughing at the fact she mentioned that a couple of weeks ago, came out of the blue. Fuzzy Soft, oh yeah, that could have been us. But anyway, Michael called and he said, I've got your name. And I said, okay, what is it? He says, well, I want you to listen as I go through it. Starts with an A. I said, okay. And he said, then it's an R. I said, okay. And then he said, and it's a T. And I said, that sounds familiar. Is there anything else? And he said, yes. When we look at your software, we think of it as not software or computers or anything. We look at it as an art form. And I said, okay. And but it's also a technical thing. And I said, yes. So the next letter is W. Okay. O. R. O. And one more letter, and it's an X. And I said, by George, he's got it. It was a perfect name.
Nice.
Accepted unanimously by the staff of the newly formed Artworx Software Company, Inc., and that's how we got our name. And Michael did indeed get involved on a sort of a consulting basis, and he and his artist, Nick DeSherbinen, designed our first boxes and started doing our advertising. And we had some very, very cute ads that they put together, which kind of leads us now to probably the next subject that you would like to talk about.
Okay.
Which is...
Well, yeah, okay. No, actually, before we get to that, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking strip poker. But so my gathering is one of the big sellers at Dynacomp was your bridge game, and that's kind of the one that you used to launch as a launch title at Artworx. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, that was a key program. And over the years, that was our best program. I keep joking that my house, our last house in Rochester before he moved, retired to Florida. This is the house that Bridge built. But yes, at that time, we to continue on something that I started before. Every time a new computer came out, and they were coming out every year, like clockwork, sometimes twice a year. Apple came out, we bought the Apple II Plus, and actually my programs were more adaptable to the Apple II Plus rather than my partner's Atari programs, which were games, and so the first programs that got transferred over to the new computers tended to be the very first one was always Bridge. That was the important one, and that was a pretty large program. Actually, as a matter of fact, we were already into Atari, of course, because of my partners, and I was that was my first project with the Atari was to bring the Bridge program over, and it was a tight fit. First Ataris were 8K as in kilobytes machines, as you know, and it was a little. Well, I couldn't fit it all into 8K, but most of the Ataris were being outfitted with an extra 8K cartridge. So all of our Atari programs were turned out being 16K. Programs that would fit in a 16K Atari, and Bridge did quite well. And we were getting submissions by some interesting people. And one of the most interesting personages at that time was Jerry White. I don't know if you're familiar with his name or not, but
sure.
Okay, terrific. Jerry had contacted us. He said, "Hey, I'm down here in New York. How are you guys doing?" "Oh, we're doing. How are you doing?" "Oh, fine. I got some programs and such. How about I come up and visit you sometime?" I said, "Sure, we'd love to.
Nice.
Love to see you." So he came up, and he brought some stuff with him, and he actually brought along a poker program that he offered to us for us to publish. And he said, "Fine, yeah, we'd love to. We'll take it on." And we did do that. And he was very much into the Atari computer. He was spending all of his free time working on it, working on projects, and meeting other Atari programmers and so forth. So we had a very interesting relationship with Jerry.
Nice. I interviewed him last year.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah. Did he talk about us at all?
I don't know, because I interviewed him last year. I don't think so. I don't think so. We mostly talked about writing and an Atari program exchange, things like that.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So that brings us to the next chapter.
Right. So who came up with the idea? Who came up with the idea of the strip poker? I mean, obviously you were kind of had your hands into card games anyway, but who made that leap, and how did that get created?
We had a lot of card games, yes. And we had it. It actually started. My two partners, the minority shareholders, were full timers at Xerox and Kodak, as I mentioned, and we would have a meeting maybe once a week in the evening in our offices in Fairport, New York, a quaint town on the Erie Canal, very historic. And the topic of one meeting was, how are we going to get our game software kicking it up a notch? He said, the big seller is the Bridge program, and we're also selling the Hearts program that I kind of cut and paste from the Bridge program's code and logic, which would sell a few pieces here and there. And we had Jerry White's Poker Party, it was called, and it was only available for the Atari. And that was not really selling terrifically. The Atari games that we were getting submitted and created, and those created by my partners, were doing pretty good. They were into the player missile graphics, and they were doing machine language subroutines and so forth. So they were doing some nice stuff, and we were selling them. And where possible, again, the card games are the easiest to put on the PET, the Commodore 64, even the VIC-20, and the Amiga, and of course the Atari. But the question du jour when we were meeting that fateful evening was, why is Bridge selling when most card players play poker? And that was a very, very good question. And I said, well, the demographics, and we're kind of muttering to ourselves. And Doug McFarland, who was working at Xerox, blurted out, he said, well, I bet if we had strip poker instead of poker, it would sell. And it was kind of like, I looked at Doug looked at Dennis Zander, who was the third member of the group who was working at Kodak, and we all kind of said, that's it. And so we began thrashing it out. And Doug said, well, look, this is what I'm thinking. Doug was our artist. He was an electrical technician, technical aide in the engineering area of Xerox, and his main duty was programming, machine language stuff, actually. And but he was very artistic. He could draw, and he liked doing graphics on the Atari, and that was one of the reasons why Doug and Dennis got into Atari was because of the graphics. Even though the graphics consisted of 4 colors and 220 by 4 whatever, no, even worse than that, 180 by 240 resolution, something like that. And Dennis had to come up with a program for creating graphics on the Atari that we were selling. It wouldn't sell very big, but people who wanted to program on the Atari were buying it, and Doug had been using it and liked it and so forth. And Doug said, I'm thinking of, I put my 2 cents worth in. I said, yeah, now the topic is kind of, you got to be careful with the topic. What I'm envisioning is a game that is funny, is cartoonish. It's in good taste, and basically it's cartoons. And Doug said, no, what I'm thinking of is something as realistic as possible, but done very, very artistically. Mm-hmm. And so it was basically, well, let's see what you come up with. So the project was started at that point, and how did we split it up? We had we were using some. We cut and paste poker routines from a different poker program that was sent to us, and we put some logic. Well, we put some logic from that into the Atari in BASIC, and we put in the hooks and links and whatever for the graphics and for sound effects. And Doug worked on the graphics using Dennis's draw pick, and we wound up with a working version that played very good poker. And Doug requested that he knew a photographer, and he requested that we spring for this photographer to do a series of nudes, starting from fully dressed to completely undressed. Mm-hmm. And that's how we would get our opponents. So we got the photographer did it. We paid him for that.
Where'd you get the models?
Well, he did that. He was a commercial photographer, mm-hmm. and he liked doing glamour photography. So he jumped at the chance. So he would find models who were willing to model, and as strip poker took off, no pun in there, by the way, we needed more and more models, but that's getting a bit ahead of myself. It's interesting the way the final version came to be. The photography was delivered in the form of slides, and the way Doug operated is he projected each image on the computer monitor, and he used Dennis's program, Draw Pick, and he went pixel by pixel, moving them with his joystick and pressing the appropriate button using the appropriate color. Mm-hmm. It was all hand done, pixel by pixel. And when he finished, we had two women opponents, and the way the game was laid out, it played very good poker. And you had to win $100 against your opponent, and when you did, then your opponent would have to take off an article of clothing. And you kept doing that until there was nothing left. Of course, if you lost $100, you were duty bound to do the same, but there's no way of proving it. So that was a scout's honor or something. But if you kept losing and they had already lost one or two articles, every time you lost $100, they got to put up they got to put the article back on, and so it would flip to another picture. So, it played good poker, and it was good graphics considering that Atari, crude as the graphics were back then, they were still the best graphics machine that was available. But before it left, before we published it, I suggested that what we do is sort of like what Gillette does with razor blades, where the razor is the strip poker master program, and we should be able to sell additional opponents.
Sure.
We call them data discs. So we when we were ready to ship, we called our we had our photographer get a few more models, including one male, because dealing in a delicate subject for us, we didn't want to do anything that was considered to be in bad taste, and we didn't want to be viewed as sexist in any way. So we decided that, something for the women, just so that we don't get called whatever. So when the first ads came out, the strip poker program was $29.95, I think, at the time, and we had 3 data discs, 2 women and 1 male, and they were like $9.95. And so that was the system. So, and I think, we blazed new ground in the field by coming out with a product where customers could buy add-ons to add to their program. And the program is set up to handle. I guess it was the code was in to handle up to 6 different opponents, and that was successful. And at that time, Atari introduced the ST, and that was an amazing device. And I think I was the one who, I had worked on that to get the bridge program over, and then I did the coding for strip poker as well. And every time we added a new computer, typically the computer had better graphics, and we had to redo our graphics as well as changing the code to use some of the features that these newer computers had. When the Amiga came out, Doug got very, very excited because that had exceptionally good graphics. So he did the Amiga conversion of strip poker and a few of his own original. He came out with a few other programs that sold modestly well. Centerfold squares was one. Very little conversions on that. We did convert strip poker to run on the Commodore 64. I was using the same graphics that we used on the Atari. We had very little to change for that computer. The Apple was, though it was a sole survivor from back then, the graphics were really quite crude, but we did have an Apple version for it. But the ST was so good that we were able to come out with Strip Poker 2, sort of a play on words, Strip Poker Roman numeral 2, because you could play two different opponents, I think at the same time, which eventually evolved to Strip Poker 3, which was the mainstay, which you could play three opponents at the same time. And we kept adding data disks as we went on. I think the ST version had enough slots for 12 different opponents. And at that time, the IBM came out with the PC, and we of course had to convert all of our programs onto the PC, including Strip Poker, which the version on the PC sold quite well, even though the graphics were inferior to its competitors. But when they came out with when the 286 machines started coming out and the 386 machines came out, you could get graphics cards that were really quite good. And at that time, once again, we would go back to the well. And what was convenient was that Ken, our photographer, when we started needing new opponents for the Atari, we decided that we wanted him to shoot on. He was giving us the imaging in slide form, and then from that we would have to make prints from that and scan them in. That was the idea. That was the way we wanted to do it. So that Doug didn't have to hand pixel everything. The equipment had gotten so good that Doug was out of a job.
Right. Just digitize the photo and
doing that.
Yeah.
So we switched over to Kodak Photo CD, which gave us a maximum resolution that was equivalent to today's high def. It was 1,000. It was about 1,080, I think, was the maximum resolution in one dimension. So every time a new model computer came out, or a new release, or the graphics cards got better, we came out with a new version of Strip Poker that employed the better graphics till nothing. It was basically high def, and at that point, it was. We were losing some accounts from that.
What do you mean?
In software publishing, the way that evolved, initially with what we did, we would copy our own programs onto whatever media is appropriate and sell them to people through the mail who wanted to buy them through us. That evolved to selling to stores. and the packaging had to be more professional. So we had to start printing boxes and things like that. And it all gradually evolved into a serious business where book publishers wanted book publishers who worked through book and magazine distributors wanted to get involved. At least the distributors did. Their business was distributing, and they could distribute computer programs. So you got companies like Ingram Publishing. There was a book publisher, I believe, at one point started. They became Ingram Micro or whatever. And in fact, they were in Buffalo. They were a distributor of ours. Mac Warehouse picked up the Bridge program, and we were on the comp list for Mac. Was it Mac Computing or Macintosh Magazine? I forget which. I think it was Mac Computing. And on the last page was the bestsellers. And when I think it was Bridge 7 came out for the Macintosh, it was a very good program, and they Mac Warehouse picked it up, and they had hundreds of stores. So we at that point had a rep. He represented our company to stores and to distributors, and he got us into Mac Warehouse and Ingram Micro, and Bridge did well. And 1 month, I get my copy of Mac Computing, and I look at the bestsellers, and I went, and I took the magazine and I went to show the staff the latest rankings, and I guess it's Bridge 8.0 was listed number 2. It hit, I think, when we first shifted into Mac Warehouse, it appeared at 7, then went to 5, and then bing, it was the second best-selling Macintosh program. And everyone was thrilled. Wow, celebrate. Yay, 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 yay. Mm-hmm. And I had a different take on it. I said, this is not good news. And why? Well, not to put a damper on it, but the reason why Bridge is doing so well is that we have no competition. And when other Mac publishers see that a Bridge program is on the bestseller list through Mac Warehouse, we're going to get competition, which we did.
Yeah.
So I was right about that. But the problem with strip poker was we started getting even Mac Warehouse, I think, had picked up some Mac versions, which were black and white line drawings, basically. And we started getting responses from them saying, look, we've got issues with the content, and we're not going to be able to carry the program anymore. And that started happening. Then that happened with Ingram Micro. So, what was the best-selling program for us, we were losing the distribution because of content. And that's not the end of the story. I mean, we were never, Artworx was never a large company. I never wanted to manage a large company. I didn't like being a boss. And I I did. I had heart surgery when I was 41, 42, thereabouts. No, I guess I was 48, something like that. Regardless, out of the blue, I was playing tennis, and all of a sudden I was getting out of breath when I shouldn't be. And after that, I observed that a few times. I wasn't going to play games with my health. I called my my internist and said, "Hey, I got an issue here. I think you may want to look at my heart." And she scheduled a stress test for me, which I failed within 1 minute of being on the treadmill. And by golly, I had open heart surgery. I had 3 blocked arteries, and everything was fixed up. I was fine. I was back on the tennis courts in a month or 2 months, and we think it was possibly stress-related because there is no physical indicators other than the fact that I had blockages in 3 arteries. Mm-hmm. So, I eased off a little bit, and we just kind of weren't really looking for any new software to come out with. We just kept publishing and filling orders. And, it was working. It was profitable. It was a very small operation. But I wanted to be able to retire at 55. And so we were just taking it easier and easier the older I got. We decided that, our Friday hours were closing the office in the afternoon. And then we decided, what the heck? Why don't we just take Fridays off? Is that sort of thing. And we started looking for places to retire to. And that's pretty much what happened. In 1997, we came down to investigate Florida's West Coast. And we saw the way life was on the West Coast as opposed to the East Coast. And we said, yeah, this looks pretty good. And the places that we looked at, Naples was the clear winner. And we went back north. We put our house up for sale. And I called the realtor who showed us around Naples and said, yep, you were right. This is it. You can start looking, and we'd love to move down in this upcoming summer, 1998. And we did. But it was the problem. The question was, what do we do with Artworx? I wasn't sure whether it really had a resale value. And I figured, well, if someone is interested in calls, that'll be fine. But I said, look, I think our plan is this. Depends on when we sell the house. And once we get a buyer for the house, we will go to Naples and buy a property there and try to move in the maybe September time frame. And we'll just run our inventory down as low as we can. And if we have inventory left, we'll ship it down to Naples and we'll keep selling it till we run out of inventory. And that was the game plan. We sold our house, and we sold it earlier than we expected. In May, and we had to be out of the house by May. So we signed on, and we found a rental condo on the boulevard in Rochester, East Avenue. That's the house where all the Kodak millionaires built their mansions. Mm-hmm. And we were 2 houses down from the Eastman House, which is George Eastman's mansion. So it was neat. It was a 6-story condo, and we signed up for through. Well, we could go month to month on that. So we moved there, and we flew down to Naples, and we very, very quickly found the perfect place where I'm talking to you from. And then we went and found a storage space for our stock, and went back to Rochester, spent a very, very lovely summer in the gentrified part of Rochester and walking distance to coffee shops and things like that. And when it came time to, we shipped a bunch of boxes that were already packaged, but we also kept at that point, we were shrink wrapping our own boxes, but we bought a hand shrink wrapping device just in case we would still have to ship to stores, which did happen. We had stores and a few distributors that still were buying mostly the bridge program. In fact, we had to go back to press a few times, which made our printer back in Rochester very happy. He loved making the boxes for us. He made a nice profit on them, and the markup in being able to sell package software was quite good. It was a very, very good business, and if run properly, we saw a lot of our very, very early competitors go out of business within a year or two. They were shooting stars. They would, in fact, one was called Star Software. Jerry White was involved in that. They had some very, very good programmers, and they had an award.
Right. I think you're thinking of First Star Software, which was founded by Fernando Herrera.
Yeah. And Jerry was involved with First Star. And we went, I went down there and visited them a few times, and I was kind of looking to see whether we could do something together, because they were very, very good at Atari and assembly language programming, wizards at Larry Missile Graphics and so forth. And but it didn't happen. The spark wasn't there, but it was interesting to watch them develop, and then, like other companies, just eventually, what happened is they all did the same thing. They were running these very very expensive full-page color ads, which we were doing also. It almost bankrupted us, running a full-page ad in 3 different magazines. If you don't have a really, really, really good action game to sell, you weren't going to make the money back through advertising. And also the shows were quite expensive. Every year, or twice a year, you had to go to CES, and that was a huge endeavor. And you could see the companies have 2 or 3 good years, and then they sort of disappeared. And I don't know who is really left from theirs. I mean, there are a few very, very large companies, Electronic Arts,
sure.
Of course.
Yeah, there's very few of the smaller companies. A lot of them were acquired and subsumed, and that was it. Yeah. So
we just...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, we just try to slowly walk away and fade away, and doggone it, every once in a while we get another order and, shrink wrap by hand and send it out. But finally, the website didn't go dark. I just put up a goodbye notice at it, and really started. I attended to my tennis, worked on my tennis game.
Yeah, is that what what you're doing now mostly? Tennis?
I'm enjoying retirement down here in Paradise.
Nice.
I play tennis 3 or 4 times a week. Play bridge now whenever necessary, but I used to play that 3 or 4 times a week. Life is good. I love to cook. I like to read. We've met some very nice people down here. Naples has grown significantly. We've been down here 18 years, and it's been a fun ride. Seeing how you come down here and you see all these Lamborghinis and Maseratis. It's really in season. It's really quite something. Very, very busy in season, and summers are hot and humid. Doesn't bother me a bit. I grew up in New Jersey. The reason why we picked Naples is because Naples, the very southern tip of Florida, is subtropical, and the dividing line between the subtropics and the temperate zone runs north of Naples and to the south of Lake Okeechobee. So Miami and Naples, we're subtropical. Fort Myers and Orlando, not so. And what that means actually is that Fort Myers and other places such as Portland will see temperatures above 100. And the highest temperature that we ever get on our tennis courts is like 96 degrees. But nice. we get that almost every day with 80-90% humidity. And air conditioning is nice. Comes in handy. There are no mosquitoes down here because the Collier County Mosquito Control Board at 4 a.m, you'll hear the planes and the helicopters spraying for mosquitoes. And I don't recall ever getting a mosquito bit.
Nice.
Yeah, very nice.
Cool. All right, I have a smattering of different questions that I've written down, and maybe we can jump around and fill in some gaps. First of all, is there any chance you still have in your storage or anything the Atari source code for any of your programs?
The Atari source code. The answer is yes. Strip poker and bridge for sure.
Yeah. Would you be willing to share that with the community and put it out there so people can learn how it all works?
Well, yes. I've been beaten to the punch. The original Strip Poker and Strip Poker 2, the source code is available through not legally, but we don't we don't enforce it. In fact, I've told I've told people who want the program that they wanted to buy it from me, and I said, well, you can actually find it online. But I think what I'll do, in fact, I will do that. I will probably not let artworks.com go dark. I think I will put up whatever I can find in terms of finished programs, and even the source code if there's a desire for it. So
that would be awesome. Thank you.
I'm going to make a mental note of that and take that on as a project.
Thank you.
When I'm not playing tennis.
Sure. No, you got to have your priorities, of course.
got to do what you got to do.
If you need any help converting the discs from old Atari discs or whatever, I can help you with that. So I've got all the equipment for that.
Terrific. I don't have much in the way of source code. I think when you I got rid of all of our old media, and so a lot of stuff was on 3.5-inch discs. And actually, I'm not sure whether I finally put them in the recycle bin or not. I'll check to see if I have that. I have all of the source code for the bridge program, but of course it depends on, we're talking Atari.
Well, that's my thing. I'm sure there are other people who are equally excited to get code for Mac or PC or whatever, but I got to cover my own base first.
Yeah, right. I'm pretty sure I have it in a form. I'll have to go through what I have.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Okay, Next question. I'm curious, you talked a little bit about blowback from strip poker, and I'm wondering if there was any other, I'm imagining perhaps magazines refused to take your ads, or you got angry letters from parents or wives or husbands or anything.
No, it was never like that, because we first off, the pro, I said, my guideline was it has to be in good taste. And that is, my good taste is someone else's pornography, I suppose. And that just can't be avoided. And we were very, very, very sensitive to that. What was happening, actually, and it's sort of being around through the changes in our society, starting in the early 80s through the present. It's interesting how it changes. It did have changes in business. When we were rejected initially from Mac Warehouse on the strip poker program, it was because of the vice president in charge of whatever. I guess it's probably the one in charge of purchasing. Let me put it this way: the rejections were always from women. So the gender, call it inequality, that was becoming more and more equal, showed up in American business, and we saw it in what we carried. We were not going to um, put out something that, first off, wasn't wanted, and secondly, anything remotely offensive. And if someone found it offensive, and that's why if they found it offensive, they would not buy it from us, and that was okay with us. And if people wanted to buy it, that's fine too. But we weren't actively advertising strip poker at that time. I don't think none of the strip poker ads, which were really quite clever, they were put together by Michael Baldwin, as I indicated, in the early 80s. We never had any problems with placing those ads.
Mm-hmm. They are tame. I mean, the one I keep seeing just has an empty chair. Yeah. It was just there was.
Yes, that was essentially the nature of it, and the packaging also was nothing that could be remotely called pornographic. Would be an overreach. What I'm trying to say is titillating. Not even titillating. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe a little bit. Yeah. A glamour shot, kind of. But it's society changes and changes for the better sometimes. Maybe things tend to go overboard sometimes. But I am the eternal optimist, and my feeling has always been that things happen. Things get better, and things will get better. And if it takes changes in our society's mores and so forth, so on, fine. Society evolves as well as businesses evolving, as well as organisms evolving. I'm an evolutionist, if you will. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, we evolved.
Good. So we mostly talked about card games, but you guys published a bunch of other things too, many of which I played because I was a kid and I was a dirty pirate, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, there was Hotel Alien and Hazard Run, and
oh my gosh, yes.
Cranston Manor Adventure, and
yes.
So any of these others just basically any stories, any memories, anything that you want to say about some of these other things?
Well, Hazard Run was one of the first games we published as Artworx, and that was written by Dennis Zander. Dynacomp, when we published Dennis's first program, I think that program was Intruder Alert, for the Atari. And we published Doug McFarland's first program, which was called Alpha Fighter, I believe, at Dynacomp. Those programs went to Artworx. Hazard Run was a neat program. Dennis is very good at learning how and to program quite well with player missile graphics. And like I said, he created his own programs to allow him to create his programs. Mm-hmm. Cranston Manor, that was an all-text program. Every once in a while, I think I may have gotten an email. Someone was asking about one of our adventures. I don't think it was Cranston Manor. Oh, one of the semi-popular programs that we had for the original Atari was Gwendolyn, and
sure.
I think we had. Was Jerry White involved in that? He may have been.
It says he worked on the sound. That's how it was credited.
Okay. Maybe I think he may have given us a sound program or whatever. But he he would come up to visit us because he liked talking with Doug and Dennis, and they were always swapping software. But the games they were swapping, but they were most interested in the tricks that they kept finding that the Atari could do, and so it was nice. We had a nice relationship with other companies.
Nice.
I'll tell you a moment that stands out for me personally.
Please.
Was my first trip to England. There is a show, essentially it was similar to the CES shows here. It was always held at Earl's Court in London, I think in early October or late September, something like that. And it went on for a week. And I attended that for 4 or 5 years straight. Not terribly much came from it. There was a company over there who, if I could remember the name, I'm not even sure I want to tell it to you. But they ripped off Strip Poker and a few other programs. But I met with the president a few times to discuss our software. I did make a side trip to Wales to meet with the developer of our languages, which I neglected to mention. Our Linkword Languages is one of our better-selling series of software. We had learned 400 words of vocabulary and grammar in weeks using this Linkword system.
So it looks like there was Linkwords French, German, Italian, and Spanish.
And we went all the way up through Dutch, Hebrew, Russian, etc.
Oh, wow.
We had 11 different languages. We didn't sell very many. Most of the Portuguese they were selling, they were asking for the Brazilian Portuguese, which is different than the Portuguese, and we were selling the Portuguese. But anyway, the trip, on my first trip there, I was walking around. I was staying near we're in walking distance of the large department stores, Harrods. I had to walk through, and I went to Selfridges, and I went to a computer department. It was not very busy, and I was walking around, and lo and behold, there was Bridge 8.0 boxed for sale. I forget what it was, like 50 pounds or something ridiculous like that. And I picked it up, and there it was, Bridge 8.0 by Arthur Walsh. We had we always had bylines on our boxes. And I looked around, there was no one there. There was no one to show it to. I looked for a clerk to say, look, that's me. I did this. I couldn't show off. But to see it up for sale over there was neat. Worldwide, anyway. And we 17 years at Xerox, doing pretty much what I wanted. I could tinker with computers and chemicals and lasers and stuff. I had a wonderful time there. It was a great company to work for. And we had our ups and downs with Artworx. Bringing a company on the second time doing it from nothing to something was very, very interesting. It eventually turned out to be a good investment, happy ending, and it allowed me to retire doing what I want to do after I had done what I wanted to do.
Nice.
So,
Well, congratulations.
happy ending.
Good.
Thank you.
Last question, I think. If you could send a message to the Atari computer users who use your games, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
God bless you guys. I mean, there's solidarity there. Those were my best moments. Programming was especially the Atari. I love the 8-bit. I was a photography buff back then. Film cameras, of course, though everything's digital now. And there's a picture that pops up on my screens every once in a while with me in the backyard in my swim trunks, sitting on a towel with an Atari 800 and a little tiny portable TV on top of that, programming.
Nice.
And I was programming Bridge on the Atari then. And when the ST came out, we got the hard drive and lickety split. We got our software on that as quick as possible. It was just a wonderful machine to work with. And so much better than the IBM that had come out. But of course, IBM did a number on the computers and Atari would. But the only email I get really now are from Atari users, and it's kind of funny. Hey, do you still have this? What's the secret to getting into that other room in Gwendolyn? I think it's neat. It's keeping the past alive in a funny way, but those were good times.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This was great, Art.
My pleasure.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute, there are two ways you can help. You can help fund these interviews directly by contributing to my Patreon. A small monthly contribution will help offset the expenses of making these oral history interviews. Contribute at patreon.com/Savitz. Or make a tax-deductible contribution to the Internet Archive, a nonprofit digital library that has done incredible things to preserve computer history. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate. Thanks.